None other than the esteemed Gore Vidal once said of my next guest, of all the giant slayers now afoot in the great American desert, his sword is the sharpest. Now that is praise indeed from the sword-bearing late Gore Vidal. Here to join us now is John Nichols. He's been with the program a number of times. We're always delighted to have him. He is, of course, the national correspondent for The Nation. He is the author of a number of books, including Horsemen of the Trumpocalypse. In his, shall we say, prescience, he wrote a book called The Genius of Impeachment a while back. It's almost as if he had foresight of the moments we live in now, the times we live in now. And with so much going on politically and regarding impeachment, we were just dying to talk to our good friend John Nichols. So first of all, John, thanks for coming back on the program.
I could not be more honored. Our conversations are always great, and so I value that. But boy, you and I have been talking about some of these issues of presidential accountability and, how political parties operate as regards all this for a long time. And so I'm going to give you prescient credits as well.
Well, thank you. I knew you were going to say that. That's a joke. Let's start with impeachment. And again, I want to remind our audience, we record on Thursdays for all, but you hear it on either the weekend or Monday. So there may have been astonishing things that happened later today or on Friday. But with that in mind, we can talk about the general nature of what's going on in the impeachment trial. Let me start with my usual sort of worry-wart streak, which is I feel as if the American electorate is divided into multiple groups. And one of those groups, dedicated Democrats, is hanging on every word of this impeachment process and these impeachment hearings, as well they should be. They're historical and critically important. I feel as if another group is sort of, mildly interested. I feel another group just disconnected from the whole thing, and yet another group, the hardcore Trump supporters, of course, think it's all fake news and so on. And I guess from a global point of view, first of all, if my sort of taxonomy of the electorate is at all correct, what, if anything, does that portend either for the outcome of these hearings or for the 2020 election, in your view?
Superb question, and I'm delighted to report that you're wrong.
Okay.
Only, and you've never been wrong in my experience before, so this is an intriguing moment.
Mark it on your calendar. Yeah.
The fact is that impeachment's getting incredibly high levels of attention, and there was a poll that came out start of the week. One of many polls, and they're kind of they come from many different perspectives, and they tell some different things. But one of the things that we've seen in the polling is that roughly 58 to 60% of people say that they are paying close attention, or at least reasonably close attention, to impeachment. Now, Richard, you're a smart man. What is the percentage of people that usually vote, roughly, in a presidential election?
Maybe low 60s, high 50s, depending on the year, maybe 60-something, 2% or something like that, I would guess.
So if we're at about 58 to 60%, right, paying close attention, pretty much the voting class of Americans, or a rough estimate of it, is say that they're either paying close attention or reasonably close attention to this. I hate the fact that we have such low turnout in America and such a dismal circumstance as regards our political processes. I know there's voter suppression. I know that there is a media system in our country that doesn't do a very good job of drawing people into the real issues of the process, et cetera, et cetera. But if we accept that, for the time being at least, our voting class is significantly smaller than that of, say, Germany or Scandinavia, that it is in the high 50s, low 60s. If the polling tells us that, roughly that percentage of folks is paying attention, I think we can reasonably say that this impeachment process has engaged a very substantial number of the people who are potentially engaged with it. And that doesn't mean they're all on the same side. It doesn't mean that they agree on even the process itself. Certainly, there are people paying attention who strongly disagree with it. But at the core level, there's a good level of engagement. And then, we get to that next question of how much faith do we have in our fellow citizens, right? And my argument is that, from a historical standpoint, that we should never prejudge that at the beginning or the mid stage of the process. Let the historians judge that. Let us say that the process is real. There is a good level of engagement. And I'll give you my best anecdote, which is that our neighbor Tina, who is a really cool person and really sharp, works as a bartender. She's a jam band fan and a super, super smart person. One of the best people I know. But she's not a political geek like you and me, right? She has a life that she lives. She comes over because her dog Dolly loves our dog Nipper. And Tina comes over to walk Dolly and Nipper. They like to walk together. And Tina has been timing her visits to go with the breaks. Tina, is that you? Yeah. Come on over a sec.
Yeah, let's hear from Tina.
To go with the breaks in the impeachment.
I think we're hearing from Tina and Nipper, actually.
Here's Tina right here.
Okay. Hi, Tina. Hi, Tina. You're kind of on TV, Tina. I hope that's okay.
We're doing a TV interview. She's a wonderful person. And Tina, can we confirm that you come on the breaks in the... Yeah, there you go. Take care. Thank you so much. That was Tina.
Well,
Tina, come here for a second. Come here. Yeah, I'll take the dogs for a second. Richard, this is your best TV ever. I hope you appreciate it. Okay, put the earphones in for a second. Okay. This is Richard Eskow, one of my wonderful journalists, really cool guy. Sit down for a second. He's gonna
Hi, Tina.
Hi
there. So John was just talking about you, as it turns out, because here's what John and I have been talking about. We've been talking about the impeachment hearings, and I told John that I was worried that maybe the American people as a whole weren't that interested in them, or maybe just like hardcore Democrats were following it, but that, other people didn't find them interesting. And he just started talking about you. He just mentioned your name, but I don't know what he was going to say. So are you watching them?
I'm definitely watching them. I kind of agree with you, though. I don't think a lot of people are paying attention.
Well, John's going to push back on that, but we'll give him a chance to do that. What do you think? Are you like a Democrat, or are you like independent? Are you Republican? And why are you watching him? And what do you think's interesting about them?
I consider myself to be very liberal, and I'm watching them because it's fascinating to me, the whole process. Yeah. Oh, who's a good boy? Oh, shoot. I'm fascinated by the impeachment process, and I think that all of the people who have been brought forth so far have been really good at what they're saying. I don't really know. I'm kind of caught off guard here.
That's all right. And I know John's dog is named Nipper. What's your dog named?
Sally.
So are Nipper and Sally watching them, or are they just like bored?
She's Dolly, and she's probably pretty bored, actually.
Okay, so it's a good thing dogs don't vote. But all right, make John come back, would you, Tina?
Oh, absolutely. Here he comes.
Thank you.
I'm not very good at
You're
this one.
perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right.
We're going to watch the credit union.
All right, off you go. Have a fun day. Hey, Richard.
So, John, if Tina's testimony it can be extrapolated from the dog population of the United States is not at all interested in these hearings. That was one of the...
Dogs have all, as a historian of impeachment, I can tell you, dogs have always, kind of stepped out of these issues.
Yes, but they're very good dogs anyway. They're good boys and girls. Okay, now back.
Offer you for that odd intervention there.
Okay, so let me push back before you continue. Push back on one thing and amplify another. Agree and amplify with another. I wouldn't even say push back, but hopefully the whatever it is, 58% that are very interested in following these hearings are largely the voting population of the country. I would argue there's another group out there, though, of hardcore Trump voters, whatever you call them, 28, 30% of the electorate, who are probably not watching. Problem is they're going to turn up and vote too, right?
Of course. But here's an interesting thing. Again, if we are at a situation where, let's say, we're 58, 60% of people in polling say they're paying pretty close attention. And you're suggesting that maybe the Trump people aren't paying all that close attention.
Right.
Well, then we're at an astronomical level of engagement with this by people who might want to hold Donald Trump to account or who might be influenced by it in a 2020 election. So again, I'm not trying to be Pollyanna-ish here. I don't want to create a circumstance where we tell ourselves, oh yeah, everybody's living on this life and breath. It's the only, it's the only thing that matters to them. It's clearly not there. But where it is at is that people are engaged at, I would argue, the level or perhaps even a higher level than they are with electoral politics. And to kind of point to my argument here, there was a debate on Wednesday night.
Right.
Democratic debate. Usually, that Democratic debate would have been the top line in the New York Times the next morning. Not always, but usually, up above the fold. The morning after that debate, which was the same day as the Sondland testimony, very critical testimony on the impeachment hearing, the Sondland testimony was the entire upper part of the front page. The debate was down. It wasn't even a story on the front page. It was down at the bottom where they say things that you can find inside, obituaries, Democratic debate. And so what I would suggest to you is that for folks who are engaged, and again, I'm not going to suggest that's everyone in America, but for folks who are pretty engaged with the political process, at least engaged enough to probably be voters, and to generally be the folks that you might want to have paying attention. If you're saying that likely voters indeed turn into the people who decide elections, you're kind of there, and impeachment has sort of pushed aside electoral politics, at least for the moment, and even pushing aside the debate to some extent, because people are highly engaged with this. So that's my case, man. I'll respect your point of view, but I
actually don't have a point of view per se. I have questions, and I think that was a great answer to that question. But I do also have what I think, and I've felt this way for a long time, something that I think reinforces your point, which is I've felt for a long time. Remember, there was a long period when the House leadership was reluctant, at least in my interpretation, to move toward impeachment because they were afraid. They were reading the polls as saying voters were not interested or didn't support impeachment. I'm old enough to remember the Nixon impeachment hearings, although I was, of course, a mere child. But at that time, voters, I don't believe, were especially supportive of impeachment until they heard the case, until the evidence was brought forward in the impeachment process, at which point, over time, public sentiment began to move sharply in favor of impeachment. And I've long felt that if people heard in testimony what's going on with Donald Trump, of course, I didn't know about the Ukraine situation, but the myriad other kinds of corruption that Donald Trump has committed while in office, I've long felt that those numbers would move upward in terms of support for impeachment once people heard the case. And I think as people are beginning to hear the case, I'm assuming those numbers are going up as well.
I think that's a pretty good argument to make. Remember, there are two cases being made, and that's important to understand. If you are watching MSNBC, CNN to some extent, you're seeing one case being made. If you're watching Fox, you're seeing another case being made. And it's been fascinating as this hearing has played out, that it's very, very clear at this point that Chairman Schiff on the Intelligence Committee is bringing in witnesses who sustain a lot of the arguments. There are some Republican witnesses, Republican-called witnesses that come as well. The witnesses give their testimony, and then they are questioned, challenged by Democrats and Republicans. It's clear they're reading off very, very different pages. And I would argue, because not everyone is going to watch every minute of the impeachment hearings, in each case, they are making arguments for what they presume will be the coverage of those hearings, and particularly on networks that, maybe a network where more liberal people listen to, a network where more conservative people listen to. This gets us into the reality of the moment, which is that we're not getting the same stream of information that you have in the Watergate era, right?
Exactly.
So
exactly. Yeah.
Touchstone.
Yeah.
There are less of them today. And so we are more siloed. That is the complexity of the moment. And there have clearly been very savvy commentators, people who remember Watergate, who say they are not sure if Nixon would have been forced from office, or ultimately if he had stayed and impeached, if Fox News had existed, or if Rush Limbaugh had existed. These are things, every aspect of our small d democratic experience, of our American journey, is evolutionary, right? And so what we're about to find out now is whether that is a factor, and how big a factor that is, and what that means, both for impeachment and for the electoral processes that may play out from it. So, we could try, you and I today, to determine how it's going to play out. I would argue we're learning.
Yeah, I agree. Let me do a quick station identification and say we are talking with John Nichols of The Nation about impeachment and the presidential campaign. So we've been talking, as I say, with John and with Tina, and a few side comments from Nipper and Sally. So, John, let's talk then a little bit about Sondland, Gordon Sondland. This is a guy that you cite as being, and others have cited as being the somewhat, at least so far, the John Dean, if you will, of these hearings, the witness who comes in and just says, yes, it was bribery. Yes, it was quid pro quo. Yes, it was corruption. And as you point out, Sondland, like John Dean, began as a supporter of the president under impeachment and has now turned to become a witness against him. Now, John Dean, since he testified in the Nixon hearings, has become, a figure of great integrity in terms of calling for, government accountability. Now, I get the sense that you feel that the Sondland testimony was a turning point in this whole thing. Is that right?
I think that's fair to say. And I think it is for the same reason that Dean's testimony was significant 45 years ago, or 46 years ago. Here's the thing to understand. In impeachment, in the processes, right, you are not surprised when longtime critics of the president, longtime rivals of the president, foes of the president, might say, hey, this guy's done a lot of bad stuff, he should be impeached. Nor are you surprised when longtime allies of a president, supporters of a president, aides to a president say, that's absurd, he shouldn't be impeached, he's just doing his job, right? These are somewhat predictable patterns. Where impeachment gets interesting, significant, where it begins potentially to move to a place that is, kind of taking us to a different discussion, is when a aide to or close ally to a sitting president says, I've got to speak up. I think something bad is happening here. I want to tell the American people that they need to pay attention to some of these actions which simply don't seem right. And I want this to be a part of the record. That's what Dean did. He did it for a number of days back in the 1970s, 73, I believe. And his testimony really was a pivot point where an awful lot of people started to say, whoa, we need to pay closer attention to this. There are things going on that are way more consequential. And frankly, he revealed evidence that then took you to next stages of discussion. I would suggest to you that President Trump's ambassador to the European Union, a guy who wasn't always that close to Trump, but who has come in and become a part of his inner circle, testifying, basically in ways that confirm a lot of the worst impressions of worst instincts as regards and deepest concerns about Donald Trump's actions as they relate to the Ukraine and the Ukrainian president. This is a big deal. And it is one of those moments that makes people pause and say, wow, Trump's own people are telling us that what was happening here was A, wrong, and B, that it does fit into a narrative that's been developed by those who suggest that the president should be impeached. So yeah, I think silence is a big deal. I also think the witnesses who've appeared before and after him in this past week, it has been a very, very big deal, because my sense is that it's a corroborating, if you will. Sondland speaking on his own, yes, of course he's going to be challenged, criticized, interpreted as people may by Democrats and Republicans in different ways. But when you have a whole bunch of other witnesses, some who were in particular rooms, some who were aides, bosses, allies, the broader circle around this guy, you end up with, pretty hard argument in favor of taking these charges, these concerns more seriously. So yeah, I think it's a pivot point.
So last devil's advocate sort of question for you on impeachment before maybe we cover the campaign a little bit, John Nichols, and it's this. And again, I'm not necessarily advocating from my own point of view. I'm being a worrier, okay? Maybe, which is, so when I think of the impeachable offenses that Trump appears to have committed, I imagine a great field of horses, any one of which you could jump on and ride toward impeachment land. It appears that the Ukraine situation is the horse we're riding into impeachment. And it worries me a little bit because I'm afraid that perhaps in taking down Trump, if that in fact is the outcome of this, that it may also, and you'll know where I'm coming from on this, it won't surprise you, might reinforce a national security narrative that I don't particularly share, and that it might be a little, I think the numbers are proving me wrong on this, but that it might be a little complicated for people to follow Hunter Biden and Trump and this and that, and I'd hate to see the Democrats have to go into 2020 defending Hunter Biden, and I'm just wondering if there were other horses that they should have also ridden, or maybe ridden instead of this one, despite the fact that I see clear wrongdoing here. Is this another case of me just worrying too much?
Yeah, you worry so much, man. You're a worrier.
It's my job. It's like I'm like Sisyphus. I just roll this rock of worrying up the hill every day. But
remember, that's a myth.
Okay. Now you tell me. Okay.
No, right. The myth of Sisyphus. But no, I happen to agree with you 100%. I think there are dangers and concerns in an obsessive focus on one article of impeachment against Donald Trump. I am in the Peter Rodino school. And Peter Rodino was the congressman from the Newark area. I think he went to night law school. He was, a real working class kid, son of Italian immigrants, who ended up in Congress. And he ended up chairing judiciary when it came time to hold Richard Nixon to account. And the thing about Peter Rodino was he was both a good lawyer and also a good politician. And by all accounts, a very decent man. And here's the fascinating thing about Rodino. Rodino determined early on in going after Nixon that Watergate was a big deal. And pretty much everybody agreed that Watergate was a big deal. But he concluded that to build a real case for impeachment, you needed to basically create a stool, right, that somebody could sit on or stand on. And that meant it had to have three legs. And so the Watergate-related stuff, the stuff we know about, certainly was a part of it. But so, too, were a host of other actions that were unsettling, troubling, and represented abuses of power. And so, too, was a final charge that focused on obstruction of justice, that basically said, in addition to this wrongdoing as regards what we talk about as the specific Watergate actions, Watergate, break-in, things that related to that, in addition to, a host of other acts of wrongdoing, there was finally a refusal to cooperate with Congress. And that's a really big deal, Richard, because what Rodino did was he gave conservative Democrats, and there were a lot in those days, as well as moderate and responsible Republicans, entry points as regards impeachment. They didn't have to vote for all the articles. Mm-hmm. Do you know the votes on the 3 articles of impeachment against Nixon were not even? Some got a lot more Republican votes, some got a lot less. But at the end of the day, they did approve these 3 articles. And obviously Barry Goldwater and others went to Nixon and said, we're going to have a hard time defending you. And Nixon chose to step down. I still believe in that approach. I think there should be at least 3 articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. I don't know if Democrats are going to end up there, but I definitely think, and I do believe there probably will be, in addition to a Ukraine-related article, a obstruction-related article. I hope and expect that will happen. And I still hold, I always have, that an emoluments clause related article would be very appropriate, and frankly, in many ways might be easier to prove.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on all 3 legs of the stool. And on emoluments, I actually think that's something people understand better. Hey, the guy got the offices, started funneling money to himself and, getting money into his hotels in Mar-a-Lago and all that. So, I would say that messaging around that would be great, especially, you and I could use the word emoluments, but I mean, I think other people, we could just say payoffs, bribery, whatever. I agree with you 100%.
Use the word corruption.
Corruption. People get corruption, right?
And we could speak about the tragedy of Mike Pence. That poor guy, he gets a chance to go on an Irish vacation, and instead of hanging out in Dublin, and Temple Bar and having a great time, he's got to be trucking across Ireland to find a Trump hotel.
Yeah, that is a sad experience. That is a sad story. So, by the way, I can't hear the phrase quid pro quo without remembering that when I worked on Wall Street, I played in a power trio with a couple of guys from Merrill Lynch, I think it was, and we were called Quid Pro Quo. That was the band name. So,
where is the video?
Somewhere you'll never see it. So I wanted to ask you before I let you go, John Nichols. So let's just, in a couple minutes, or whatever, talk about the campaign, the Democratic primary. You and The Nation, and everybody should be reading you in The Nation, thought you nailed Andrew Yang. I think you've got a good take on Bernie. What did you think of the debate the other night?
I thought the debate was a very useful debate, complicated in a number of ways, as all debates are. I thought that the moderators did a pretty good job of introducing a lot of topics, and they kept it moving. The problem that I always have with debates is that they kept it moving. Right. It got, they moved it so fast from topic to topic that sometimes you didn't get to dig in deep. I thought there were some stunningly important moments, and frankly, some fun and intriguing moments. The fun and intriguing, I'll give it to Andrew Yang. Best off-the-cuff line in a debate, I think, in recent years, maybe decades, maybe since Reagan talking about exploiting Mondale's youth and inexperience. And this one didn't look like it was a, kind of like prepared line. They asked Yang, once you become president, which is sort of intriguing right off the bat. They said, well, you're going to be talking to, Vladimir Putin. What will you say to him? And Yang comes up with, sorry, I beat your guy. Great line,
Yeah.
It's a stellar line. And I also, there were other moments where people, Amy Klobuchar got off great lines. And frankly, in debates, that's a part of the game. But for the important moments, which I wish they had taken a little more time on, look, in the midst of a broader foreign policy discussion, Bernie Sanders volunteered ideas about and concerns about the condition of the Palestinians and the whole of the Israel-Palestine debate. That doesn't happen very often in our debates, and I wish the moderators had, kind of turned to the other candidates and said, hey, this is one of the longest-term issues that the United States has had to deal with. Bernie Sanders has just talked about, needing to kind of reframe and rethink how we approach this. What do you people think? I think it would have been a great thing, and so they'd go deeper on some of those. With that said, also, for quick highlights, the final thing I'd say is I thought Cory Booker was stunningly good on the issue of the drug war, legalizing marijuana, and all of the issues related to that. Very, very powerful, very effective, and I think it might actually help him a little bit politically. Beyond that, I do think that basically the debate probably didn't move things dramatically.
I think that's a great breakdown and assessment. I would offer two since the Reagan-Mondale debate. Two moments. One was the different seeming Joe Biden of 2008, saying that Rudy Giuliani's idea of a sentence is a noun, a verb, and 9/11. I thought was a great line.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And as someone working for Bernie in 2016, I glowed with pride when Hillary Clinton said she would be consulting with friends like Henry Kissinger. I don't know who he'll be consulting with on foreign policy. And he said, well, it ain't going to be Henry Kissinger. I'll tell you that. He's no friend of mine. I was very proud. It may not be a great line, but I glowed with pride.
No, that was believe me, I was at that debate. And, that was my story. I was
right.
It's like the two people, if you go after, well, one group of people and one individual, if you go after Henry Kissinger or the British royal family, I'm there. I'm with you.
Yep, and I would rank them in that order. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. There are, as always, a million other things I could talk with you about, but I know you have deadlines, we have deadlines. So John Nichols, everybody should be reading John at The Nation and his books as well. John, it's always a great pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for the great reporting, and thanks for coming back on the program.
It's a total honor. I'm always delighted to be with you.